Okay, good evening, everyone. Broadcasting live from Stony Creek, Ontario. I'm back. I'm back this evening. Today we have a quote. Scroll to the top of our meditation page. Maybe we should start by having someone read the quote off in the Hangout, no? It's too bad Robin's gone away. Is there anybody else out there who wants to join the Hangout? We can invite you in. If you're on Google Plus, give me your name. I guess for today I'll read it myself. It's a long one though. I tell you this, let an intelligent person who is sincere, honest, and straightforward come to me, and I will instruct him, I will teach him Dhamma. If he practices as he is taught, then in 7 years he will attain in this very life, by his own knowledge and vision, that goal for the sake of which young men go forth from home into homelessness, and he will abide in it. Never mind 7 years, he will be able to do it in 7 days. Now you may think the monk Gotama only says this in order to get disciples, but this is not so. Let he who is your teacher be your teacher still. You may think he wants us to give up our commandments, but this is not so. Continue to live by your commandments. Or you may think he wants us to give up our way of life, but this is not so. Continue to live your way of life. Or perhaps you will think he wants us to practice things that are wrong or not practice things that are right according to our teaching. But this is not so. Continue to avoid the things your teaching considers wrong and practice the things that your teaching considers right. But there are unskillful things not yet given up, things tainted, leading to rebirth, fearful, with painful result in the future, things associated with birth, decay, and death. And it is for the giving up of these things that I teach the Dhamma. However, if you practice correctly, these tainted things will be given up, and the things that lead to the purification will grow and develop. You will attain the fullness of perfected wisdom by your own knowledge and vision, and abide in it in this very life. This is a quote that's quite dear to me. And I suppose it's simply a quote that is useful to refer to especially when talking to people who aren't Buddhist, to explain to them our stance and the requirements we have, the requirements which in fact we don't have for people wishing to practice the Buddha's teaching. Today I came back from British Columbia, got to the airport in Vancouver, and I came out of the washroom, and just as they were making an announcement, anyone on Air Canada who would like to take an earlier flight, please come to the counter. And I was walking to the counter anyway. I walked up to the counter. I said, do you need people to take an earlier flight? They said yes. They got me on a earlier flight with the worst seat, the worst seat on the plane, the very, very back in the middle seat between two people. But as chance had it, the flight I ended up on, the man sitting next to me and 3 of the stewardesses ended up flight attendants ended up asking me for advice on meditation. The man sitting next to me had been doing 10-day Vipassana meditation courses, and so we talked about Vipassana, and actually we talked quite a bit about philosophy, and he said, so who am I? We were talking, I mentioned something that made him ask, who am I? And so we talked about that for a while. He asked, what was the purpose of life? Why are we here? Or something like that. And I said, he was from Spain, so his English wasn't so good. And so I said, you know the game Monopoly? And in fact, he did know the game Monopoly. And I said, well, if you look at Monopoly, it's a sort of a game that has a clear goal. There's a purpose. And I can't remember what the exact goal of Monopoly is, but there is one. I think it's bankrupt everybody else. And then you win the game. That's a game with a purpose. But then I said, you know Lego? And yes, he knew Lego. And I said, what's the purpose of Lego? And, you know, I said, well, the point is that there's not a set goal. So the problem is that we look at life from a paradigm, usually a Judeo-Christian paradigm, or a biblical, theological, theistic paradigm, which is a lot like Monopoly. But the world isn't like that. The world is more like Lego. You can build it, and so I made this analogy for him. And he thought about it, and he came back and he said, yeah, but even with Monopoly or with Lego, the real point is to enjoy yourself. And I said, yeah, but, you know, after a while, you get bored of the Legos. This is Buddhism. Eventually you get bored of the Legos. And then we talked more about the idea of the flaw in the idea of how enjoyment being the goal of life, you know, the reason for living is to enjoy. Because I said happiness doesn't lead to happiness. This you can quote me on. I think I'm pretty unique in having said that. I don't know. Anyway, it's a very Buddhist, I think it's a very Buddhist thing to say. Can't think of where exactly the Buddha may have said it, but happiness doesn't lead to happiness necessarily. Goodness leads to happiness necessarily. So I said, if you take these two goals, one person has the goal of enjoying life. This is their goal. Another person has the goal of being good, or cultivating goodness. The funny thing is, the one cultivating goodness, who has maybe no interest, and eventually no interest in cultivating enjoyment, it actually turns out to be the happier one. And so we talked about that. And then one of the flight attendants was from Vietnam. She's Canadian, but she was born in Vietnam. And so she asked me to bless her mala. But we talked, and she was interested in meditation, and she wants to come and visit me here. And then two other of the flight attendants as well. And I'd had a bunch of extra books, so I gave up my booklet, and we talked. Now the guy on this side who was sitting in the aisle seat, I don't know what he didn't seem at all interested, so we were talking over him, and I don't know how he felt about it all. But this quote makes me think back on that, and remark that really this is what it's all about: sharing, cultivating goodness by giving, by sharing the teachings. Meaning teaching is open without any strings attached. That's my point. The point is sharing, giving without any strings attached, not even requiring people to become Buddhist, right? My favorite part here is the monk Gotama only says this in order to get disciples, but this is not so. Let him who is your teacher be your teacher still. That's powerful. And it's a powerful reminder that we're not looking for students. Not looking for people to say, this is my teacher, I am his or her student. Apologize also for the masculine pronouns in this. It's all masculine, right? Doesn't really have to be. I will instruct them. We could change all of these. But anyway, it's an awesome quote. It's a direct quote. One of the most authentic, if you believe any of them to be authentic, this is from a set that is among the most likely to be authentic. So this is what the Buddha actually said, as far as we know. And it basically says that it's a lion's roar, really. I mean, it's exemplifying the complete purity of the Buddha in intention, in terms of just helping. You practice these things, they will help you. This is the lion's roar we have. I don't need you as my disciple. We're not looking for converts. We're not even asking you to give up the practices in your own religion. But, and the point is, with all of the things that you're doing now, our claim to those people who are not practicing meditation is that you're missing something. Meaning, with all of that, there are still unskillful things not yet given up. That's the implication here. Meaning, with all of the things that you are doing, and this speech was actually given to a bunch of ascetics. The Buddha went to see them. If you read the sutta, it's, let's see, it's Digha Nikaya number 25. Udumbarika Sihanada Sutta. It's the lion's roar to the Udumbarikas. So the Udumbarikans were, I don't know, a bunch of naked ascetics maybe. The Buddha said this to them, and this is the lion's roar that he gave. This is one of the great lion's roars. Means it's a bold statement, something that roars, and just anyone who listens to it, you would think would be moved by it. As soon as he says this, the next paragraph reads, "At these words, the wanderers sat silent and upset. Their shoulders drooped. They hung their heads and sat there downcast and bewildered. So possessed were their minds by evil. Then the Lord said, the Buddha said, every one of these foolish men is possessed by the evil one, so that not a single one of them thinks, let us now follow the holy life proclaimed by the ascetic Gotama, that we may learn it. For what do 7 days matter?" And the point is, why not try it? If his claim is that we could get this in 7 days, what's the problem? Let's try it for 7 days. But not one of them thought that, because they were so fully possessed by evil thoughts. So that's our quote for tonight. Let's go for some questions. Brooklyn mentions the Erewhon Shrine in Bangkok. Should maybe give a moment of silence for that. Send our good thoughts. Everyone should send their good thoughts. Let's have a moment of silence here, online, live, where we all close our eyes and send good thoughts to Thailand, to the people who passed away, that their spirits might find peace, to the people who are left afraid, worried about their country, may they all find peace. Okay. how to make sense or live with such reckless hate and the destruction it brings. Would love to hear anyone's ideas on reconciling this. No, I don't know. I mean, that's part of samsara. If anything, it should wake us up to the fact that we're none of us really safe. Suffering, death comes to all. Suffering comes to all. We should not be negligent. The problem is we think we have all this time. We think everything's safe and stable. We're like chickens, ducks. Mahasi Sayadaw talks about these ducks or chickens that walk around pecking the ground as though they had so long to live, and yet they're all going to be slaughtered. If you look at animals, you can see this very clearly when they bite and hurt each other, and then the next moment they pretend that everything's fine. Human beings we have very much the same behavior. We're negligent. Even when we have the writing on the wall, the hints all around us, we still act as though it will never happen to us, when it actually happens to all of us in some form or another. Is Vipassana meditation comprised of entirely noting sensations and thoughts, or is there a point where we are supposed to move past the rising and falling of phenomena and do something else? See, it sounds like you might be talking about a different tradition, because in our tradition, Vipassana meditation is comprised of the four Satipatthana: the body, the feelings, the mind, and the Dhammas. And it's entirely based on, you say noting, so it's based on our noting. When we say rising, falling, that's the body. Or when you say sitting, or when you walk and say walking, walking, that's body. When you feel pain, so pain, pain. Thinking, thinking. Liking, disliking, drowsiness, distraction, doubt. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. But yes, Vipassana meditation is just that. The four Satipatthana. Same practice. You don't ever do anything else. Once you practice that to fulfillment, there's the cessation, the attainment of cessation, which is the realization of Nibbana, which is freedom. The mind lets go. Samatha meditation can be a bit distracting. Well, samatha meditation, maybe not distracting, no. Maybe it could. I don't know that that's exactly what I said. Maybe it was. Sometimes I say things that are not exactly accurate. Samatha meditation can be lead to complacency. So not exactly distracting, but it can slow you down, potentially. It doesn't have to, but it does in practice have this effect. Where it keeps you from progressing. But can also be very helpful for Vipassana meditation, giving you good concentration, as long as you then know to use it for the practice of Vipassana. The guy waiting to get into the monastery, no, that's not Kung Fu series. The Kung Fu series, do I even have a microphone here? Huh. Microphone's way over there. Is anyone listening to this? Sheesh. Sorry, there's the microphone. Somehow it got off. If you were listening to the live stream, I apologize for the very, very low volume. That was certainly, yeah, should be louder now. Kung Fu series, how did that go? It was something different. He was forced to go stay in the monastery. No, the King of American Shaolin or something. That's the movie I'm always referring to. I think it's something like King of American Shaolin. I think it's the whole movie's on YouTube. You can go look for it. Should we accept inequity in the world as part of the human evolution? I don't know about the word human evolution. I think you have to be careful using that word. But as part of the human state, inequality is part of the nature of karma, we would say. You know, a lot of it just has to do with karma. Rich people who are stingy become poor people. Poor people who are kind and generous, when they pass away, they become rich people. So unless everyone's going to have the same karma and have the same level of kindness and generosity, not everyone is going to be born into a situation where they have the same capabilities. That being said, I think the more kind and generous people are, the more equality there is. So if the world were more, if people became more kind, with people always giving to those who needed, right, there would be more equality. Rich people would give to the poor people, so it would level out. Whereas the more stingy and unkind people are, the more inequality there is. No, that doesn't quite make sense, because if everyone were stingy, then everyone would start to be poor, which is probably why you see nowadays most people are poor, because we're very stingy and we just, on a whim, we decide to be very generous, and then, oh, we're suddenly very, very rich for one life, and then back down to be very poor, because when we were rich, we were greedy and not stingy and evil. I mean, that's a karmic perspective. I mean, it certainly doesn't mean that we should accept and say, oh, well, let the rich people keep their wealth. No, if you're rich, you have a duty. You want to stay rich. You want to be a rich person, really, to get the best out of their money. They should give most of it, or at least half of it, away, I would say. Maybe a quarter of it away, at least, if everyone did that. How do you judge a good meditator as opposed to a less skilled meditator? Well, you don't judge meditators against each other. You shouldn't. Well, it's pretty easy, really. I mean, when you give exercises to the meditator, do they come back and say they could do it, or do they say they couldn't do it? When the meditator tells you about their practice, are they able to talk about their experiences? Do they tell you what they did and relate how they were mindful? Or do they come and ask you all sorts of questions about the self and argue with you about, Buddhist philosophy, as though they don't even believe, they don't even accept it, Then you think, oh, this person has some problems, because sometimes they just come and argue with you, and or more so, they come and complain, which is fine, it's not that complaint is a problem. Some people really have difficulty with the practice, and that's fine, but that person, you would say, okay, is going to have a harder time of it. That's fine. It's not to be discouraged, but some people practice and practice very easily. I wasn't one such person, so I see no shame in being I can't look down on someone for being a poor meditator, but I was a fairly poor meditator. Have been. It's not difficult to recognize good and poor meditators. It's easy to be tricked, I suppose, by a meditator if they tell you all the right things. So if a meditator comes to you and their practice is too good, like if they say, oh, everything's fine and I'm doing really well and I'm really enjoying the practice, then sometimes you can be suspicious that they're not really practicing. Many times. I mean, it is possible to have a pleasant practice, but it's also quite possible to not really practice mindfulness and therefore have a pleasant but useless practice. What is the difference between the right-hand path and the middle way? I don't know the right-hand path. I'd never heard of that. We have the right path and we have the middle way. And actually they are the one and the same thing, but I don't know right hand. If you mean the right path, that is the middle way. The right path of the Buddha is the Eightfold Noble Path, which is not an extreme path. So it's not torturous and it's not indulgent. It's balanced. What types of things should be unlocked while meditating? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Not familiar with that terminology. Or maybe I'm just too tired. It's been a long day, weekend. Take your pick. Yep, I made it back in time, so I'm here to do the stream. It's nice to see people coming out. But maybe we'll stop it there, no? If you have any more questions, you can save them for tomorrow. I'll say goodnight there. Thank you all for tuning in. Be well.